Hello and welcome to Property Summits, the must-see show for landlords, investors and developers alike, where our panel of experts delve into the very latest developments in the property world to make sense of what it means for you. I'm Emma Birchley, and joining me today are Nicholas Wallwork, an investor, developer and property mentor who makes the most of his expertise in his role as CEO of the world's largest international property forum, providing advice on how to make money through property. Tony Gimple is a man with a direct and no-nonsense approach when delivering advice to buy-to-let landlords, investors and developers, whether that's on tax, accountancy, finance or succession planning. Also with me is John Howard. He knows a thing or two about the property business, having bought and sold nearly 4,000 houses, apartments and developments over 4 decades. Joining me too is Paul Mahoney, best-selling author and serial entrepreneur. He's the founder of Nova Financial Group, providing property investment advice with a particular focus on the buy-to-let sector. And last but not least is Richard Bush, who turned a personal interest in crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending into a professional passion, co-founding Crowdlords, which pools resources to enable more people to benefit from investing in property. Hello to you all.
Hi.
So today we're going to look at development in a bit of detail, and this is where you're coming in.
We like that. Yeah, that's our bag for sure.
Excellent. Okay, so it's a booming market at the moment, isn't it? What does that mean for developers?
Well, I think normally it would mean a bad thing. You know, we want a stable market. You know, slight inflation is good, but it means often that the stock's harder to get in a booming market. It's been a weird couple of years, as we all know, with COVID and Brexit and the election and all that sort of kerfuffle for the last couple of years, and that really stagnated the market. Combine that with the permitted development rights that came in way back in, I think it was 2015, the stock actually sort of kind of dried up in the last couple of years, where all of the easy buildings have been snapped up by developers like ourselves and converted to residential. So, you know, combine that then with the pandemic, stock's actually not been particularly easy to get. More recently, hopefully most of the viewers will be aware that the permitted developments have now been further eased to kind of allow for the COVID impact. We don't want to see empty shops, so there's now kind of, I think it's class MA, where you can do uppers above shops and the backs of shops and things like this. So they've broadened the permitted development rights. But alongside that, you know, like they say, give with one hand, take away with the other, they're putting more restraints around it. So we've had traditionally Article 4 direction areas, but now they're putting in more constraints around, you know, I know we've always had sort of acoustic flooding, those kind of things, but there are now more restraints to protect certain buildings not being converted. Back in the end of March, there was the minimum size requirement that came in that we've talked about previously, that upped it to the national space standard for units of 37 square metres. So that stopped developers like myself doing micro studios. We were doing sort of 25, 30 square metres and really space designing them to get an extra few units out of a site, which made permitted development very attractive. So that's been taken away, more restraints, but potentially more stock. We're definitely seeing more stock come to the market. There are people going, unfortunately, bust. You know, there are various offices now with people working from home or moving out to the country, potentially some great locations that will be now coming to the market. We are starting to see that. I don't think the full impact of that has been seen yet, has it, John? But it's coming.
I don't think it has. But what really annoys me is that these councils are using Article 4.
Yeah, just to get control back, really.
Explain Article 4 for those who might
Nicholas, explain Article 4.
Yeah, Article 4. Yeah, Article 4 is essentially where the local councils can apply to the government and put an area on a map. They literally draw a line around certain roads, you know, around the centre perhaps, or around a particular business park that restricts and removes the permitted development rights. Okay. They could only restrict certain permitted development rights. For example, office to residential schemes. On a business park, they might say, well, that business park's earmarked Article 4, you can't then implement these changes through permitted development. It doesn't stop you doing a full planning application, but I think, you know, you're pretty mad in most cases to go up.
The clues in the fact is
they've said, we don't want it converted. So,
and I think it flies in the face of Robert Jenrick
is trying to do
the government. It really does, and it's a way of taking back control from central government to the local level by slapping an Article 4. So the first thing anybody should be doing If you look at an office building, you think, well, that looks good, we might be able to be converted.
Yeah.
Is check it's not an Article 4 area.
Check that first.
Office buildings was something that there was permitted development on before, wasn't there? For the developers among you, what are the new kind of areas you're able to look at now that you couldn't before?
Well, I think one of the big ones I mentioned there is the shops.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of retailers really struggle with everything going online. I mean, Jeff Bezos is sitting there rubbing his hands with glee, of course.
Amazon,
and Amazon. You know, the shift online in all areas of business, whether it's Zoom meetings or doing business online, has changed dramatically, and people have got used to a new way of doing business. I now take many phone calls a day that people just call me on Zoom or WhatsApp video call me. You know, that kind of shift in mentality and habit has changed for good. Not for everyone, but a percentage of the market has changed for good, and that's the same for retail shops. A lot of these shops won't come back in the same gusto. And they're going to get converted to residential.
But once they're gone, and representatives of the high street are really not happy about that, are they?
No, I can understand why. In many ways, it's a real shame. But I think what we're going to see is a different high street. You know, we're going to see consolidation. We're going to see more service-based industries going there, and it'll change the face of it. But it will evolve, and things evolve in life. Unfortunately, we've got to go with it.
I think we are, Nicholas. But the issue also is that a lot of these shops don't convert very well into residential.
No, exactly.
You know, and as a crowdfunder, would you know? Are you, if someone brings to you, Richard, a scheme that you know is a commercial to residential ground floor shop into a house or something with no garden, basically no front garden, no back garden,
no parking, maybe.
No parking. How are you going to feel about that?
John, you're selling it to
well,
me.
I'm just.
This is John's latest deal.
I'm just looking for some funding. I'm just looking for some funding. No, but how would you feel about that? Because you know it's important. Just because you can do it doesn't always mean you should.
No.
Yeah, precisely. And a lot of the small shops are too small anyway. You know,
size requirements
to justify,
and stuff. Yeah,
and
of course.
it's not necessarily the ideal position for a flat, is it? Looking onto a high street, so. You know, I don't think that makes a difference, but there are other areas that you can now convert, are there not?
Yeah, obviously offices are still big business, and I actually think that's probably going to free up that office stock. That one's the first one that got brought in, but I think that's key. I mean, there are industrial buildings that can be converted as well. Yeah. There's doctor surgeries, D1 uses, all that kind of stuff can now be interchanged via PD, but it is still quite restricted. It's not as easy as everyone thinks.
It is quite restricted because I recently bought a technical college. Not to go back to college because I never went to college, by the way. Before you
got expelled, didn't you, John? I'm sure.
I didn't get expelled. I left a bit early. So, but interestingly, an educational college, does not come under PD, which means you've got to prove that it's got. No one wants it for educational purposes or any other commercial purpose.
You're not surprised by
for
that.
Probably 12 months before you can then convert it into residential, which is crazy. The whole point of it being on the market and the point of us buying it was because no one else probably wanted it. Yeah. So. The government haven't got that right.
No, exactly. They're still making it very hard for us, despite the dangling the carrot. It's not quite as easy as we'd like to think.
No, but with an ageing population who may have reduced mobility, coming back to town centres, you know, where everything, you know, is in, you know, convenient within walking distance, plus drive to public, the thrust to get people using public transport. Not being, you know, by cars, having everything on site in the one place.
But Tony, that's absolutely right, but it needs to be quality. I mean,
yes,
Paul isn't going to suggest to his clients that they invest in, you know, a really nasty block of flats in the city centre if it's not quality, are you, Paul?
No, that's true, but I suppose the other side to that is there's no point having empty shops. No point having empty space in the centre of town. So if it can be done well, it should be.
Yeah, I agree.
And I suppose that's probably the logic to it, right? It's about there is an undersupply of residential stock pretty well everywhere, you know, in all main areas where people actually want to live. So if it can be done, then it probably should.
So when it comes to actually doing the developments you're talking about, how important is it to have the right consultant team, the right advisors behind you, backing you up?
I think it's all important. I think a lot of people overlook how hard it is to do the actual development. And there's a lot of courses out there, a lot of property education that teaches this strategy, that strategy, rent-to-rent, lease options, HMOs, commercial conversions. Well, that's great, but how do you actually deliver the project? There's not a lot out there doing that. So I firmly believe that that's a huge sort of area where people need better educating. When I'm working with my mentee clients, it's all about the development phase, actually. You know, they kind of know what they're doing strategy-wise. It's you can go on the internet for a couple of hours of research and get an idea of what's possible to convert. You know, but it's about delivering that project effectively. That's where you make the money, and the devil's in the detail. Like everything to do with tax, you know, there's absolute detail that you've got to nail, and the professional team helps you do that. I mean, multiple people feeding into every little facet of a development.
That's right, Nicholas. I always say, surround yourself with the very best people. I'm not sure. Of course, I've done that today.
You're sat next to me, aren't you, John?
I've done that today.
So you've proven
surround
your
yourself with the very best people you can, and the difference between paying a very good property consultant or whatever it might be, and an average one is not that much. So actually, you know, spend what you can afford, but the team around you is so important. You know, the QS, the building surveyor, and so on. It's so vital to get the right advice. And don't worry if they're more experienced and better than you. You want them to be.
Absolutely.
You want them to be. That's so important.
For people who've been through this, you presumably, at some point, you started at the beginning. How important is it to start small and learn what you're doing? Or can you just take the tower block, you know, the old office block, and go, right, this is it?
Yeah, I think that's a bit of an easy question to answer, isn't it? But, you know, again, it's about the detail. If you've got really high-level consultants, if you've got a lot of cash and you invest in the right consultants and right mentors and lead project managers, then potentially can do bigger stuff. You know, institutional investors don't go in there and get their hands dirty. They pay the right team, but I think
they also pay through the nose as well. Most of the time.
Yes.
And I think although you've got the right team, what you have to remember is you are the captain of the ship.
You ultimately make the decision.
You ultimately make the decision. They're very bright, they're very talented, but they won't take the risks you take. They don't want to take the risks. They don't worry about. They're worried about crossing the road.
They're worried about their PI insurance.
That's why they're consultants. So you're the one who's got to make the ultimate decisions and everything. And if you haven't got that right advice from an entrepreneur, property, whatever, not educated as much, but someone who's actually doing it at the moment and done it, then you're going to get into trouble still. Because they will be so belt and braces around you that you either won't make any money or it'll take forever to get organised and so on. Because although they're very professional, very good, they need pushing, they need driving forward, and someone has to drive them forward.
I'm interested to know what Richard does with, you know, when you do your due diligence on a developer that you're lending to. Do you look at the professional team and you know, what sort of level of detail do you guys go into choosing a developer?
We do, and to pick up on your question, Emma, about if you're doing your first one, we would never fund a first-time developer, but a lot come to us, and we always say, do the first one in partnership with someone who's done many before, because the only way you learn this is by doing it, I think. You know, you can read as much as you like, but actually the only way of
you make the mistakes and learn from them.
You've got to make the mistakes. Well, ideally not make the mistakes, but you know, you learn from what somebody else has experienced. I think that's
and I think that's what's wrong with a lot of this property education is that, you know, they're in a classroom environment, if you like, you know, once a month for a year or whatever, and pay a load of money. But actually, you just get out there and analyse some deals and learn the ones. You know, it doesn't cost anything to analyse a deal and learn how to do it, and then find the right one. And so on. It's so important.
I do think that property is a confidence game though as well, and I think investing in general is a confidence game, and that's why there's so much logic to sort of starting small and building in confidence as you go.
I was going to say that, how brave do you have to be at the start?
Exactly. You know, if you do the big tower block the first time, even if you've got loads of money, there's a higher chance you're going to lose that money, and if you lose a couple of million, well, you're probably not going to rush into doing it again.
You can be overconfident. I mean, I know people, I always say third deal syndrome, I call it. So the first deal, they make some money, they're very, very diligent. The second deal, they're not quite so diligent. They've got the nice car, they've been on a holiday, they're a bit more relaxed. They don't take people's advice like they should. The third deal, they think they know everything and they lose the money. Yeah. Third deal syndrome.
Good point.
I think I get a lot of anti-social media inquiries.
Anti-social media?
Well, I just call it anti-social media.
Is that just you, or is that aimed at you? Or
Absolutely. I'm totally anti-social as well, you know. And people, you know, Facebook in particular, you know, in some of the groups, you know, I've just come into some money, or, you know, I've been made redundant, I have some money, I want to get into property. You know, should I go on one of these, you know, courses? I want to be a developer. I want to convert. I want to flip. And I I always answer them the same way. You know, go and get yourself a short evening class or infill course on how to be a project manager. Learn some of the trades.
Yeah.
Learn how to manage that small team. And that would probably be the best money you could ever spend. And then look at why people go wrong and why they lose money, and how to choose the right site. And when you can say to the brickie, that I want it this bond, Flemish bond or stretcher bond, or the chippy has actually put in the wrong type of timber, you can talk to them with confidence.
You can. That's not always easy. I mean, when I was training racehorses at home part time, I used to ride out every morning with the lads. But you can fall off and make a bit for yourself. Luckily, I rode quite a lot anyway, and I didn't. But that's not the point. So you have to. If you're not, you've got to be careful with that, Tony. I agree with you, but I think you've got to be careful because you come over as knowing too much to a builder and their guys, and you don't. You're going to be found out very quickly.
Yeah,
they'll know, and that's. But I see your point, and I don't disagree. What do you think, Nicholas? I don't.
Yeah, I think just circling back round to Emma's question, where can you do it at any level? I think the answer is the sensible way to do it is to build up. Do smaller sites, do a little shop with 2 or 3 flats in it if it's viable. I mean, my issue, by the way, with these new PD rights and some of the shop conversion ones is that I think they're probably a lot of them almost too small to do. You do 3 flats, it costs the amount you've got to put into it. Even in London, the build cost is almost in line with the asset value at the end, so it's marginal. So they sound great, these PD rights, but not necessarily worth doing.
The other ones on PD, of course, you can go, and we looked at this on a few occasions so far, and not been successful, by the way, you can go 2 stories higher on a detached block of flats if it's built between 1940 something and 2018, is it, or something like that? But the council, the planning authority have got now, they've been given by the government so many get-out clauses, like, if it overlooks somebody else, well, it's bound to overlook someone else, basically, or it doesn't look very nice.
They don't like
they
it.
They can turn it down. So it's pointless having that, really.
Yeah.
Pointless.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
Now, a short time ago, you mentioned brickies and chippies, and raw materials are a really important thing at the moment because they have become very expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's that's mostly an effect of Brexit. It's also people coming back after lockdown and coming in with gusto rebuilding. So you combine that sort of perfect storm, and you've got certain trade materials drying up. I mean, you must have seen it on your sides. I've seen it on ours.
Yeah, and my advice is if you can afford to buy the materials up front and store them, buy them up front, because what you don't want is an excuse for the contractor or the builder to stop work.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
if you can do, but make sure if it's on site that your builder has got it insured, and make sure they prove they've got it insured. But that way you've got continuity and the job should fly through. Otherwise, they could easily end up having to stop for a month, 6 weeks.
Because one thing knocks onto another, knocks onto another. Yeah.
And one of the reasons is because during lockdown the factories were closed, so there's no stockpiling. So normally they'd have stockpiles. They haven't got any stockpiles. So what's happening is they're being manufactured in wherever it's been manufactured, whatever it is, and it's going straight away. They can't build up any stock, and that's the issue. But they do think within sort of 12 months, inflation. I mean, it's gone up. Timber, for instance, has gone up 100%. Raw timber, and bricks have gone up, and all sorts of things. But they do think it might start coming down in 12 months' time.
I mean, the
do you
manufacturers.
hang about then to do your deal?
Well, to be fair, some deals we do, and do take a long time to get off the ground. So, if you're purchasing a property, it needs planning permission. Then you need to get organised. It could be 6 or 9 months before you start anyway. Hopefully not, but it could be.
It's better to stop and pause and leave the project on a bridging loan for 6 months.
Oh, you would say that, wouldn't you? You would.
The reason being, John, as soon as you start drawing down on the senior loan,
good point.
that starts building up the cost of finance. And
you're normally right, Richard, to be fair.
Thank you. So it is, we've had a project up in Scotland, and the cost inflation was something like 35% overnight. Luckily, they sold the properties off plan on the first day 50% more than what they'd expected. So actually it's more profitable.
They passed it on,
it was
taken
an incredible,
what they can.
luckily, but that's not very common. Typically cost is an issue at the moment.
It is, but what you've got to remember is that on most jobs, it's 50% labour costs and 50% material costs, roughly. So when it goes, so if the material's gone up 30%, it's only 15% over on the job.
Yeah, and don't forget, property prices of the end product have probably inflated
But you
higher
can't
than your overall
rely
cost.
on that, Nicholas.
I'm not suggesting you rely on it, I'm just suggesting that it is happening in line with that.
It is happening,
So
but it's a dangerous thing to rely on, to
Yeah,
expect.
Of course, and it could all go
It could
the
all
other
go
way
the other
in
way.
January,
Absolutely.
halfway through your build
Who
or whatever.
knows?
So
Who
yeah,
knows?
it's,
Yeah.
we wish we had a crystal ball as developers.
So you said 12 months that you think that these materials might come
That's what
down.
they're saying, Emma, yeah.
Based on what?
Based on the fact that I think that
With
they'll have
Brexit?
stockpiles, supply and demand. I mean, at the moment, there's contractors having to pay way over the odds to keep going, if you like, on a site, because there's only a certain amount of materials available in the UK, and people are grabbing it.
And put yourself in the seat of a manufacturer. They're making hay whilst the sun shines.
Sure.
They're going to increase their working hours. They're going to work weekends. They're going to do everything they can to create more materials. So, you try and squeeze up time lost on a development. And, if you have a delay at the front, you try and make it up at the back, so you still hit the deadline. It happens all the time on sites.
Yeah.
So it's kind of similar. All these manufacturers
Yeah.
are jumping up a gear. They want to make more money. They want to get the materials out there, and it'll sort itself out. It's a temporary issue.
It will settle down.
The other challenge is labour, in that there is a shortage of labour.
Yeah.
At the moment.
Big shortage of labour.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
How does Brexit add to that?
It doesn't help. Or it doesn't help, but then there's lots of things that are good about Brexit. So,
Yeah.
There's a shortage of fire strategy engineers at the
say
moment.
that.
as
I
well.
would say that. So would Tony, probably. And Paul really doesn't have an opinion. I'm not sure Paul has an opinion about it, but
Irish Australians Untitled
exactly.
Chapter, you know that?
When you bring it,
don't
At least he knows his place.
We now allow you in tariff-free, so you should be grateful, to be honest with you. But there we go.
when you bring everything together that we've talked about today, the materials, permitted development rights, all these things, is it a good time to be a developer?
There's never a bad time to get into property. You need to plan your strategy. You need to have the right team around you. If you can mitigate these things. We're not packing up shop and going home. We're just analysing the material costs in more detail and going out to a wider pool group for tendering, perhaps. We're working with Eastern European developers on a big site at the moment, and they can get better access to materials from different locations. So maybe your choice of construction firm might be changed. It's if you wait another 6 months, property prices might be up another 20%.
You never have a crystal ball.
All the
do
best
we?
PD sites have been snapped up again, and where are you?
Most developers are entrepreneurs, and they're positive people, and they'll try and find a way around a problem.
Definitely.
Tendering is an interesting point, actually. How important is it? How many different quotes should you be getting?
It's massive. I mean, that goes back to the original question of, how important is the consultant team? Because the consultant team, your project managers, QSs, all these guys, if you do all of that work up front, you check if there's asbestos, issues with concrete, groundworks, if there's any demolition. If that's all done up front, you're able to go out to tender with more accuracy. So the incoming construction firm know exactly what they're building. You give them full floor plans, full M&E, mechanical, electrical drawings, which is all the plumbing and electrics. You basically design that building from the ground up, give it to the contractors, and they can quote. And those quotes will come in very similar. You're then really just negotiating on their overhead and profit.
And actually, the better that work is, the cheaper the price will be.
Cheaper the price will be, yeah.
And are you getting someone who does the whole lot, who's got the plumbers, who's got the chippies, who's got the, or are you going out to people separately? What's the best way?
It depends on the site, doesn't it, John? The smaller sites, you might manage the subbies.
Site you might do, but to be honest with you,
For
we've
brief,
always
lack of
got
brief, you
contractor.
go for
we've always just
one
done
contractor.
a schedule of works, fixed price contract,
JCT contract.
JCT contract.
And
small works
the
contract.
benefit with that is a lot of the PI and a lot of the risk goes on the main contractor. They own the site for that period. The health and safety falls to them. Sometimes the design can fall to them. It could fall to an architect. But ultimately, the more you can outsource,
hopefully not,
because they're very expensive.
My views on architects.
5% of the build costs often,
Crazy.
so they make a huge amount of money on sites.
And
But
going back to the materials, if the contractor's given you a quote, do they have to suck it up if the wood goes up?
a lot of it, yes, depending on the contract. Sometimes you have provisional sums in a contract. If you're not quite sure about a certain item or there's a market risk, they might try and negotiate that as a provisional sum rather than a fixed sum. So, you get a fixed sum contract, but it doesn't mean every single line item is fixed. There might be some variables. If they haven't purchased the windows yet and you need to replace 200 windows on a block of flats, they're not going to commit to that price because a subcontractor is going to deliver that.
But the other thing, Nicholas, is to make sure you have a contingency sum.
Yeah,
So
good point,
on
John.
a conversion, that would be normally 10%.
So this is your buffer zone.
A buffer zone. And on a new build, I don't think it needs to be more than 5%. Do you do 5%? Or
We tend to aim for 10%.
I thought you
at
would.
least 5%.
Yeah, I thought
Be
you would.
safe.
If they're on the
He's a sensible
ball,
man.
listen, if everyone's on the ball, 5% is enough for new build, 10% for conversion. And if it's listed, I always put in 15% in. If it's a listed building, because it's more intricate and so on.
And I think sometimes the bigger the site, I know it sounds
Yeah. I know
you
what
know,
you're saying.
wrong, but sometimes the bigger the site, the lower the contingency, because
Yeah,
you can
it's
do so
easier.
much more consultant
Yeah.
work up front. You actually can remove the risk by spending money on the consultants.
Yeah.
Smaller sites sometimes carry bigger risk because you can't afford, it's not viable to
No.
pay all those consultants. So you need a bigger contingency. So,
And also, the bigger the contractor, the better they are on the whole.
Yeah,
on the
exactly,
whole,
yeah.
the better they are.
One of the things you have to do when going out for tender is making sure you've done the financial due diligence.
Very good point. Yeah.
Because the cheapest price can often mean they've cut their margins.
really good point.
One quick
Too
trick
far.
I use on that, I want a contractor that's 4 times the size per annum turnover than the job they're doing for me.
Excellent advice. Well, we are out of time, I'm afraid, gentlemen. Thank you ever so much.
Pleasure.
Hope you've learnt a lot today, and join us next time for more expert advice here on Property Summits.